This is the story of a woman who believed family would protect her, but instead they were the first to betray her. After her father's funeral, she returned home expecting grief, not betrayal. Instead, her own mother and sister secretly seized her $100,000 wedding fund, then threw her out of the house, broke, heartbroken, and in tears. They believed she was finished. They believed she would never dare to come back. They were wrong. On the day of her sister's engagement, she returned with one hidden truth, a secret so powerful that it shattered their lives, exposed their greed, and changed everything forever. This is Nancy's story. And now I'm going to tell it to you in her own words. My name is Nancy, and for 25 years I was the invisible glue holding my family together. While my sister Tiffany spent her teens and early 20s perfecting her aesthetic and chasing viral fame, I was the one sitting at the kitchen table with my father, Arthur, helping him navigate the complex spreadsheets of his small logistics business. I never resented it. In fact, I cherished those late nights. Dad would look at me with tired, proud eyes and say, "Nancy, you've got a steady hand and a good heart. You're the one who's going to build something that lasts. Just remember, I've made sure you'll never have to depend on anyone but yourself." I believed him. I also believed I had a real family. I thought my mother, Beverly, loved me, even if she spent 90% of her time praising Tiffany's latest Instagram post or coddling her after a hard day of making TikToks. I was the reliable one. I worked 40 hours a week as a junior data analyst, and every single Friday I'd hand over 20% of my paycheck to my mother for the family grocery fund, only to see her use that money to buy Tiffany a new designer handbag because the poor girl had a stressful week. The real test of our family's soul came when Dad's heart started to fail. For 6 months, I was the one sleeping in the uncomfortable plastic chairs of the cardiac ward. I was the one who spent my personal savings, nearly $12,000, on his experimental medication because the insurance wouldn't cover it fast enough. Beverly only visited when the hospital lighting wasn't too depressing. And Tiffany? She came once, took a selfie holding Dad's hand for her family first highlight reel, and complained that the smell of antiseptic gave her a migraine. Dad saw it all. He saw who stayed and who strayed. Before he passed, he reminded me about the 2 high-yield savings accounts he'd set up years ago, one for me, one for Tiffany, $100,000 each. "That's your foundation, Nancy," he whispered. I didn't care about the money then. I just wanted my dad. But the moment he was gone, the shadow I'd lived in for years started to get very, very cold. The funeral was a blur of black lace and fake tears from Tiffany, but 3 weeks later, the fog of grief finally started to lift. I needed to move forward. My old car was on its last legs, literally smoking on the way to work, and I knew it was time. I drove down to the local Toyota dealership, my heart thumping with a mix of sadness and a weird sense of accomplishment. I'd picked out a modest charcoal gray Camry. I wasn't looking for a Ferrari. I just wanted something that would get me to my analyst job without breaking down on the I-95. "Everything looks great, Nancy," the finance manager, a guy named Mike, said as he tapped on his keyboard. "We just need to process the $20,000 down payment from your savings and you're good to go." I handed over my debit card with a small, shaky smile. I could almost hear my dad's voice telling me I was making a smart investment. I waited. And then the air in the room changed. Mike frowned, swiped the card again, and then looked at me with that pitying expression people reserve for victims of a joke they haven't heard yet. "I'm sorry, Nancy. It's being declined for insufficient funds." "That's impossible," I said, my voice cracking. "There's over $100,000 in that account. Try it again." He showed me his screen. Transaction declined. My blood turned to ice. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling so hard I almost dropped it, and logged into my banking app. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. Current balance, 0.0. I scrolled through the history. 2 days ago, a massive wire transfer had moved every single cent into a joint account I didn't recognize. The recipient names on the internal memo, Beverly and Tiffany. I didn't even say goodbye to Mike. I ran to my car and drove home like a woman possessed, my vision blurred by hot, stinging tears. I burst through the front door expecting a mistake, hoping for an explanation. Instead, I found them in the sun-drenched kitchen. There was a bottle of expensive Veuve Clicquot on the counter, and they were clinking glasses surrounded by shopping bags from Gucci and Chanel. "Where is it?" I screamed, my voice raw. "Where is my money?" Beverly didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip of her mimosa and set the glass down with a sickeningly calm clink. "Oh, Nancy, don't be so dramatic. Tiffany is getting engaged to a very prominent family, and she needs to look the part. She already spent her fund on that jewelry business that didn't pan out, so we decided to pool the family resources." "Pool resources? You stole from me," I sobbed. "That was Dad's gift to me." Tiffany rolled her eyes, checking her nails. "Dad would want me to be happy, Nancy. Besides, you're the career woman. You're smart. You can just work overtime and make it back. I have a brand to maintain. Give it back, now." Beverly stood up, her face hardening into a mask of cold authority. "Actually, Nancy, since you're going to be so ungrateful, we've decided this house is a bit crowded. Tiffany needs a dressing suite for her wedding preparations, and your room has the best light. We've already put your things in the garage. You have until sunset to get them off the property." She handed me a heavy-duty black trash bag. I looked at the bag, then at the mother who had just erased my existence for the sake of a brand. I realized in that moment that I wasn't looking at family. I was looking at predators. I spent that night in the driver's seat of my rusted-out car in the corner of a Walmart parking lot. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly blue light over the trash bags crammed into my back seat. Everything I owned reduced to plastic sacks because I wasn't on brand enough for my own mother. The heater in my car groaned and eventually gave up, leaving me shivering in the dark. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut, mourning my father all over again because he was the only person who had ever truly seen me. But as the clock hit 3 a.m., the sobbing stopped. A cold surgical clarity took over. I realized that Beverly and Tiffany hadn't just been greedy, they had been sloppy. They thought I was the quiet one who would just take the hit and disappear into the night. They forgot that I was the one who managed Arthur's books. I knew how money moved, and I knew how the law worked. I remembered a conversation I'd had with my father's old attorney, Mr. Henderson, a year ago. He had called me privately to verify some signatures. I realized then that Beverly must have dug up an old, limited power of attorney Dad had signed back in 2018 when he had his first minor surgery. It was supposed to be for medical emergencies only, and it had definitely expired the moment he passed away. By using that document to bypass a bank teller's scrutiny and drain a private account, they hadn't just been mean, they had committed a federal felony, wire fraud, identity theft. I didn't need a miracle. I needed a paper trail. I pulled out my laptop, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and began downloading every bank statement, every time-stamped transfer, and every voided document I had access to. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a hunter. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Henderson's office. I didn't look like the broken girl from the parking lot. I looked like a woman with nothing left to lose. When I showed him the bank transfers, his face went from professional concern to sheer disbelief. "Nancy," he said, leaning over his mahogany desk, "this isn't just a family dispute. This is high-level fraud. But there's something else you need to see. Something your father insisted I keep in the vault until you truly needed it." He pulled out a folder labeled The Arthur Trust. Inside was a transfer on death to deed for the family home. My father knew Beverly's history of reckless spending. He knew that if he left the house to her, she'd mortgage it to the hilt to fund Tiffany's whims. So he bypassed her entirely. The moment Arthur took his last breath, the legal ownership of that 4-bedroom colonial didn't go to his widow. It went to me. "You can kick them out today, Nancy," Mr. Henderson said. No, I replied, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I want them to feel exactly as secure as I did before they pulled the rug out. I want them to spend every penny of that stolen money first. For the next 3 weeks, I played the part of the defeated daughter. I moved into a small temporary studio apartment and ignored Beverly's mocking texts about how peaceful the house was without my negative energy. I watched Tiffany's Instagram stories with a predatory focus. She was busy planning a $50,000 engagement party, a royal garden gala, at my house. She hired high-end caterers, a floral designer who specialized in rare orchids, and a valet service. She was burning through my $100,000 to impress people who didn't even like her. Meanwhile, I was at the police station, handing over a meticulously organized binder of evidence to a detective in the financial crimes unit. I was giving them enough rope to hang themselves, and Tiffany was happily tying the noose. The night of the Royal Garden Gala arrived, and the house I grew up in looked like a movie set. Thousands of fairy lights were draped through the oak trees my father had planted, and a string quartet played softly near the rose bushes. Tiffany was center stage in a $3,000 silk gown, clutching a glass of my stolen champagne, surrounded by 100 friends who were busy filming everything for their stories. Beverly stood beside her, beaming, finally living the life of luxury she thought she deserved. I pulled up to the curb at exactly 8:30 p.m. I wasn't alone. Behind my car were 2 local precinct cruisers and a van belonging to a 24-hour locksmith. As I stepped out of the car, the valet tried to stop me, but I didn't even look at him. I walked straight through the front gate, the police officers flanking me like shadows. The music died a sudden, screeching death as we marched into the center of the garden. Tiffany froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "Nancy? What are you doing here? You're embarrassing yourself. Get out before I have security throw you out." "That's funny, Tiffany," I said, my voice projecting across the silent crowd, because I was just about to say the same thing to you. I turned to the sheriff and handed him the original TOD deed and the immediate eviction order signed by a judge that afternoon. "Officer, this is my property. These people are trespassing, and I have reason to believe they are currently in possession of assets obtained through federal wire fraud." Beverly stepped forward, her face turning a blotchy, panicked red. "Nancy, stop this nonsense. I am your mother. This is my house." "Actually, Beverly," the sheriff said, stepping into her personal space, "the deed says otherwise, and we have a warrant for your arrest regarding the unauthorized transfer of $100,000 from a private trust." The gasps from the crowd were deafening. 100 iPhones weren't filming the royal gala anymore. They were filming Beverly and Tiffany being read their Miranda rights. The locksmith began changing the deadbolts on the front door while the caterers started packing up their trays, realizing they weren't getting paid. Tiffany's fiancé took one look at the handcuffs, took one look at me, and walked out the gate without saying a single word to her. He didn't even look back when she started screaming my name, a high-pitched, ugly sound that echoed through the neighborhood. By midnight, the house was silent. Beverly and Tiffany were in the back of a patrol car, headed to the county jail to wait for a grand jury. I sat on the porch steps, the same steps where my dad used to sit and tell me to be strong. I've sold the house now. It held too many ghosts. I took my recovered funds, the proceeds from the sale, and I moved 2,000 miles away to a city where nobody knows my name. I've blocked their numbers, their lawyers, and every flying monkey relative who tried to tell me family is everything. Family isn't blood. Family is the person who sits by your hospital bed when everyone else is at a party. My father was my family, and thanks to him, I'm finally, truly free. Nancy's journey is a powerful reminder of how quickly greed can dismantle a family. But what do you think? Was the mother more to blame for the enabling, or was Tiffany's entitlement the real poison here? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, it's important to remember that this story was a dramatization, a fictional scenario created for the purpose of societal reform and to spread awareness about financial abuse. We share these dark realities to empower you, not to provide a roadmap, so please do not repeat these negative behaviors or legal schemes in your own life. Justice was served for Nancy because she stood her ground, and we hope her story helps you recognize the red flags in your own world. If you learned something valuable from this video, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us for more stories every single day.